Commander Eric Voss's eyes snapped open, the cold bite of metal shackles biting into his wrists and ankles, pulling his attention back from the haze of unconsciousness. His muscles screamed after the rough transport, but the dull, humming silence of the alien prison cell was far worse. The walls were smooth, metallic, and sterile, reflecting the harsh white light overhead without mercy. It was a cage built for breaking spirits, not bodies. 3 hulking figures loomed beyond the transparent pane of his cell, a trio of Drovak guards, their exoskeletons glinting with embedded armor plates. Their faces were a cruel map of sharp ridges, mandibles twitching with amusement. Their yellow, predatory eyes locked onto him like he was a cornered rodent. "Look at this one," snarled the tallest, a scar running from eye to chin. "They say humans are clever, but all I see is a trembling animal." Voss clenched his jaw. He had heard the jeers since the moment he'd been dragged from the wreckage of his mission on Skargen Prime. The Drovak believed themselves supreme hunters, perfect predators of the galaxy, ruthless and brutal. Humans were nothing more than prey to them, easy to mock. "You're soft," the second guard hissed. "You'll break before the first day ends. Your kind's weakness is in your heart, not your claws." The words stung, but they also lit a fire deep inside Eric. He had stared death in the face too many times to be cowed by alien bravado. The galaxy thought humans fragile because they felt empathy, because they protected their young and bonded as families. But Eric knew better. Humans were cunning, unpredictable, and above all, survivors. He shifted slightly, testing his bonds. Cold steel cuffs locked tightly, but every lock had a flaw. His eyes flicked to the corners of the cell. Small ventilation grates, a control panel just out of reach, and the guard's predictable patrol pattern. He could hear the distant murmur of the facility, alien voices, mechanical clanks, and the occasional guttural roar from creatures caged deeper within. Somewhere a creature howled in fury, but it wasn't fear that trembled in that sound. It was challenge. The guards began their ritual, pacing outside. Voices, dripping with mockery as they threw scraps of food and insults through the opening slot in the door. Voss said nothing. Silence was his weapon. Let them fill the air with noise. He would focus on the cracks beneath. One guard, a younger Drovak with mottled green armor, sneered, "You call this a human? You're barely a threat." Eric's lips curled in a slow, deliberate smile. Threats aren't always loud. The cage door hissed open, and the tallest guard stepped inside, looming over Voss like a mountain. The stench of sulfur and iron clung to him. "You're going to tell us everything about Earth's defenses," he growled, "or we'll see how clever you are with broken bones." Voss's gaze didn't falter. "I'm no prisoner. I'm a warning." The guard laughed, cruel and low. "You're a curiosity, nothing more." The hours crawled into days. Eric's body ached, but his mind was a fortress. He replayed every moment of his capture, every scrap of intel he'd gathered, every instinct honed over decades of warfare. The Drovak might see themselves as apex predators, but they didn't understand the quiet strength of a mind that never surrendered. Late one cycle, the cell door slid open again. This time an alien in a pristine white lab coat stepped in. Unlike the guards, this one's eyes were filled with something like fascination. She studied Eric like a scientist with a rare specimen, not like a conqueror with a broken enemy. Humans are fascinating," she said, voice cold but curious. "You survive by thinking, by cooperating. But can you fight when you have no hope?" Eric's eyes sharpened. "Hope isn't a weakness, it's a weapon." She smiled thinly. "We shall see." As she left, the guards exchanged uneasy glances. The facility was buzzing with rumors about the human prisoner who didn't break, who didn't plead. For the first time, doubt seeped into the Drovak's arrogant certainty. That night, Eric lay on the cold metal floor, listening to the alien world beyond his cage. The predators outside believed they controlled everything, that their claws and teeth made them unstoppable. But humans had survived extinction events, world wars, betrayals, and isolation. They weren't just prey. They were something else, something waiting to be unleashed, and when that moment came, the galaxy would learn a new truth. You can cage a predator, but you cannot tame the apex. Eric Voss was dragged from the sterile confinement of his cell into a sprawling chamber that pulsed with alien energy and savage anticipation. The air thrummed with a heavy scent, equal parts fear, blood, and something darker, the raw thrill of the hunt. Before him stretched the Predator's arena, a brutal theater where the galaxy's deadliest creatures were pitted against one another, for sport, spectacle, and proof of supremacy. The arena was a colossal dome-shaped structure filled with layered terrain, jagged cliffs, thick underbrush, and jagged outcroppings of alien rock. Massive viewing galleries circled the arena's circumference, filled with snarling Drovak nobles and delegates from dozens of conquered worlds. Their alien eyes gleamed with hunger, not for food, but for blood. Eric's arms were still bound, but the chains were lighter here. The guards shoved him forward into the arena's center, and the crowd erupted with cruel laughter. "Look at the human," a Drovak aristocrat bellowed, his voice carrying over the din. "A creature so soft it will crumble at the first swipe of a claw." Voss's lips curled into a slow, deliberate smile. He had been in tougher spots. What awaited him here was a challenge, yes, but also an opportunity. From hidden chambers along the arena's edges, monstrous beasts were released, each a living weapon, bred or evolved to be the ultimate killer on its homeworld. A multi-limbed carnivore from the jungle moon of Zerkak, a burly, scaled brute from the molten caves of Pyrrhus, and finally, a sleek, shadow-moving predator from the void planet Navarre, silent and deadly. They lunged at Voss in a cacophony of snarls, claws, and teeth. But Eric did not run. Instead, he pivoted, slipping into cover behind a jagged boulder. He moved with an economy of motion that the Drovak crowd couldn't understand. To them, strength was raw power, speed was simple reflex. To Eric, it was the art of survival. He observed the beasts carefully, noting their hunting patterns, the Zerkak's over-aggression, the Pyrrhus's reliance on brute force, the Nivar's stealthy strikes. Then he began his counter. Using the arena's terrain to his advantage, Voss lured the Zerkak into a narrow canyon, where its multiple limbs became a liability rather than an asset. It flailed wildly, crashing into rock walls, exhausting itself. Next, he baited the Pyrrhus into chasing him across the molten fissures, where a sudden collapse trapped the beast beneath burning rubble. The Nivar was the most dangerous, silent, and cunning. But Eric exploited the creature's reliance on shadows, igniting small fires to flood the darkness with light. The beast snarled, blinded, and Eric struck, incapacitating it with a quick, precise strike using a broken fragment of alien metal hidden in his boot. The arena fell silent. The crowd's laughter died, replaced by stunned murmurs. Voss stood, unbroken and unbowed, bloodied but victorious without firing a single shot. A Drovak noble, his mandibles twitching in disbelief, sneered, "Trickery, coward's tactics." Eric met his gaze, voice low and steady. "You call it trickery because you cannot understand it. You hunt, yes, but you do not adapt. You rely on your claws, your strength. Humans, we survive because we evolve. We plan. We endure." The nobles exchanged uneasy glances. Some barked scorn, others muttered amongst themselves. But the seed of doubt had been planted. One of the alien scientists, a sharp-eyed researcher named Kirilis, stepped forward from the gallery, her voice carrying over the crowd. "This human's methods are unprecedented. Our data shows no species capable of such rapid adaptation to varied threats without prior conditioning." Eric's gaze locked on hers. "You study survival as if it's a formula. It's not. It's instinct, intelligence, and the refusal to surrender." The crowd grew restless, some rising to voice outrage, others clearly shaken. The idea that humans might not be simple prey but something more began to unsettle the arrogant empire. As the guards pulled him back toward the holding cells, Eric's mind raced. This was only the beginning. The Drovak thought they had captured a weak animal. They had no idea they had trapped a predator. Behind him, the arena's shadows lengthened and twisted, a dark stage set for the uprising to come. The cool glow of the interrogation chamber's lights was a sharp contrast to the brutal chaos of the arena. Eric Voss sat, wrists still bound but chin lifted, as the Drovak scientists and military officers gathered around a holographic display, flickering with Earth's history. The room hummed with quiet tension, an uncomfortable energy far different from the mocking crowds. Kirilis, the sharp-eyed alien researcher who had taken an unusual interest in him, tapped a panel and the hologram zoomed in on Earth's greatest conflicts. Images of bombed cities, towering factories, and lines of determined soldiers marched through the air. How can a species so fragile survive such devastation? She asked, voice tinged with disbelief. Eric's eyes burned with quiet defiance. Because we don't just survive, we adapt, we innovate, and we fight back harder than anything you've ever faced. The Drovak commander present, a massive warrior named Thrax, snorted. Your species is weak. You have no claws, no fangs, no natural armor. What makes you think you can claim the apex? Eric smiled, a slow, knowing curve of his lips. That's exactly what you don't understand. Predators hunt, prey runs and hides, but humans, we're something different. We're apex because we combine every survival instinct with intelligence and collaboration. We learn from our mistakes. We plan generations ahead. We wield technology as an extension of ourselves. The hologram shifted, showing humanity's rise from the burning trenches of ancient wars to the cold vacuum of space. The history of Earth was a chronicle of relentless adaptation. Famines, plagues, wars, environmental collapse. Humans endured them all. Tell me, Drovak, Eric said, voice steady. How many species in your empire have survived for tens of thousands of years, rebounded from extinction-level events and conquered the stars? How many species evolved weapons more deadly than teeth or claws? Kirilis's eyes narrowed as she absorbed the data. Your evolutionary records are unusual. Your rapid technological advancements are unprecedented. But can you truly be apex without the strength to enforce it? Eric's gaze sharpened. Strength isn't brute force. It's persistence. It's the will to endure when everything else falls away. It's the ability to adapt your mind and your body to overcome every challenge. The tension in the room thickened. Even Thrax shifted uncomfortably. The image of humans, a species they had dismissed as insignificant, was transforming. No longer were they prey. They were a threat. What you call weakness, Eric continued, we call preparation. We build alliances. We innovate in the shadows, and when the moment comes, we strike with precision and unity. Your claws and teeth mean nothing against that. A low murmur swept through the assembly as Kirilis turned the hologram to detailed images of human psychological warfare, covert operations, and technological warfare. It was a testament to human tenacity, their ability to turn the tide with strategy rather than pure aggression. Thrax's voice was a growl, but the confidence was gone. Your species might have survived by chance, not by design. The galaxy will judge. Eric leaned forward. It won't be chance, it'll be inevitability. Suddenly, the chamber's doors hissed open, and a young Drovak officer burst in, breathless. Commander, we've intercepted transmissions from the border systems. Reports of rebellions, uprisings, sabotage, sparked by this prisoner's message. The room froze. The Drovak had underestimated more than just a man. They had ignited a spark. Eric's eyes gleamed with fierce satisfaction. Good. Let them learn what happens when they dismiss the apex. Kirilis's voice was softer now, almost reverent. You speak as though you are the end of their world. I am, Eric said simply, as the officers argued and scrambled. To regain control, Eric's mind raced. The seed of doubt had become a wildfire. The Empire's arrogance was cracking, and he was the catalyst. The apex wasn't born of teeth or claws. It was born of relentless will, of intelligence sharpened by adversity, of a species that refused to bow no matter the cost. And now the galaxy would pay the price for their contempt. The stark white lights of the interrogation chamber flickered as the assembly broke apart, leaving Commander Eric Voss alone with Kirillus and a handful of skeptical Drovak officers. His proclamation had unsettled the room, but fear was a subtle poison, one that fed on doubt and division. Eric knew the real battle had only just begun. Back in his cell, the silence was broken only by the hum of distant machinery and the occasional metallic scrape of patrolling guards. But Eric's mind was far from still. He was playing a different kind of game now, one of patience, manipulation, and psychological warfare. The Drovak believed their strength lay in physical dominance, their empire unshakable because of their power. But every empire had cracks. Eric had spent hours observing guard rotations, listening to their communication protocols, and noting subtle rivalries between alien factions. The insectoid Ythara, for instance, were rumored to be savage and untrustworthy, but in captivity, Eric noticed a glimmer of curiosity and intelligence in their queen's compound. If he could exploit this, he might find allies in the most unlikely places. That night, as the facility's massive turbines thrummed with low-frequency vibrations, Eric began his first move. Using a tiny fragment of sharpened metal he'd concealed inside his boot, a piece scavenged from his last fight, he carefully scraped at the restraints around his wrists. It was slow work, each scrape masked by the hum of the ventilation. Outside, the guards laughed and joked, confident the human was broken. They had no idea Eric was turning their own complacency against them. But more than the physical locks, Eric targeted the mental chains. He began dropping subtle words during interrogations: seedling, mistrust between the Drovak officers and scientists. Did you hear what the Ythara queen said to the prisoner? That she finds his tactics intriguing? He murmured, loud enough for his captors to overhear. It wasn't true, not yet. But rumors spread faster than truth in an empire built on fear and suspicion. Kirillus approached him one cycle later, curiosity flickering behind her cold eyes. You play a dangerous game, human. Why? Eric met her gaze steadily. Because this cage is temporary, and all cages have weaknesses. The scientist's lips twitched in a semblance of a smile. You are unlike any prisoner I have studied. There is something primal about your mind. Eric nodded slowly. The primal is survival. Meanwhile, the internal security logs showed rising tensions. The Drovak factions grew suspicious of one another, covertly spying and reporting false alarms. Guards began to question their orders as the facility's AI system, supposedly impregnable, started flickering under strange commands. Eric had hacked into the system during a brief power surge, embedding subtle code that allowed him glimpses of camera feeds and door controls. He watched the sprawling labyrinth of corridors, noting patrol routes and blind spots. His alliance with the Ythara began with a whispered conversation through the thin walls of their adjacent cells. The Queen's voice was cold but intrigued. You fight differently than any creature I have known. Tell me, what do you seek? Freedom, Eric replied simply. Not just for me, but for every soul chained here. The Queen's response was slow, measured. If you break the chains, the hive will follow. This fragile alliance was Eric's key. Together, human cunning and insectoid ferocity could dismantle the Empire's foundation from within. But he knew the Drovak would tighten security once they sensed unrest. Every move had to be calculated, every risk measured. One wrong step and the rebellion would be crushed before it began. Days passed in a blur of whispered conversations, stolen moments, and coded messages hidden in the guards' banter. The facility's atmosphere shifted. The Drovak's confidence, once so sure, now trembled beneath the weight of paranoia. Eric smiled in the dark, the faintest spark of hope igniting. The mind game was his arena now, and in it, he was undefeated. The clang of metal echoed through the labyrinthine corridors of the Drovak prison facility, but it was no longer the sound of shackles locking a prisoner down. It was the roar of chaos unleashed. Eric Voss moved like a shadow, his hands finally, free after days of meticulous work with the stolen plasma shard. The small razor-sharp fragment had been concealed beneath his worn boots until the perfect moment. Now the restraints that bound his wrists and ankles fell away with a hiss of released pressure. Freedom tasted electric in his veins. But there was no time to savor it. The alliance forged in whispered conversations with the insectoid queen Yathara had blossomed into a violent uprising. Word had spread like wildfire through the prison's dark corners. Chains could be broken and the apex predator was loose. Eric's heart pounded, but his mind was a blade honed by every battle he'd ever fought. The facility's AI, corrupted by his subtle hacks, blinked erratically, unlocking doors and confusing security protocols. Prisoners, once resigned to despair, now surged with raw fury. From the shadows emerged warriors of countless species, united by a single burning purpose: freedom or death. The corridors erupted into battlefields. Drovak guards shouted orders, but their practiced formation crumbled under the unexpected assault. Plasma bolts lit the air, but Eric moved between the firefight with calm precision, guiding groups of prisoners through the maze. He caught sight of the insectoid queen herself, towering and fierce, her many limbs slicing through guards like blades, through silk. Her hive warriors rallied around her, their snarls a savage symphony of rebellion. Eric yelled over the roar, "Push forward! Take the armory! Disable their reinforcements!" A group of alien prisoners surged ahead, and soon they stood before the heavy steel doors of the armory. Using the knowledge Eric had hacked from the AI, they bypassed the security lock and flooded the room with stolen weapons. Now armed and desperate, the prisoners transformed from prey into hunters. Drovak commanders scrambled to regroup, but the rebellion's momentum was overwhelming. Explosions shattered walls, firestorms bloomed in the ventilation shafts, and drones meant to surveil and subdue prisoners turned their targeting systems on the guards instead. Amidst the chaos, Eric found himself face-to-face with Thrax, the massive Drovak commander who had mocked him weeks ago. The two locked eyes, a silent challenge passing between them. Thrax snarled and charged, claws extended. Eric dodged with a practiced roll, grabbing a shard of molten metal from a nearby wall and slashing across Thrax's armored leg. The commander roared in pain but was far from defeated. Their battle was brutal and close quarters, each strike a conversation of violence. Eric relied on speed and precision, Thrax on raw power. But as they fought, a dozen rebels swarmed the area, tipping the scales. Thrax, snarling in frustration, retreated into the chaos, nursing his wounds. Eric allowed himself a brief breath. Around him, the tide of the uprising surged like a wildfire out of control. Prisoners, once broken and beaten, now stood proud and unyielding. The facility was no longer a prison, it was a battlefield for freedom. He activated a comm link stolen from a fallen guard, broadcasting his voice through the prison's network. "Drovak, hear this. Your empire is built on chains and fear. We are the ones you thought weak, the ones you mocked. But we don't just survive, we dominate. Release your grip or be consumed by the fire you lit." The message blared through every speaker, igniting a frenzy. Some prisoners faltered, overwhelmed by hope. Others screamed in rage. Guards hesitated, unsure whether to fight or flee. Explosions rocked the facility's core as sabotage teams hit power conduits, plunging sections of the prison into darkness. Shadows danced with violence in the dim emergency lights. Eric moved swiftly through the chaos, coordinating attacks, rallying rebels, and striking down threats with lethal efficiency. His voice was a beacon, his presence a symbol of the apex, predator unleashed. In the heart of the prison, the insectoid queen approached Eric, her multifaceted eyes gleaming with grudging respect. "You have proven yourself human," she hissed. "The hive follows. Together, we will tear down their empire." Eric nodded grimly. This is only the beginning. As the first reinforcements from the Empire's military attempted to land nearby, the prisoners braced for the next phase, escape. But They would not flee as prey. They would fight as apex predators. The distant thunder of approaching warships shook the sky above the prison facility. The Drovak Empire was sending reinforcements, elite soldiers and battle cruisers meant to crush any spark of rebellion before it could flare into a full-scale insurrection. But they had miscalculated. They hadn't accounted for the apex predator loose inside their walls. Commander Eric Voss stood atop a crumbled observation tower, his gaze fixed on the horizon where the enemy fleet materialized through the thick, swirling clouds. Behind him, the prisoners and rebels moved like a living tide, armed and ready. The insectoid queen, Ithara, flanked him, her many limbs twitching with anticipation. "This is their last chance," Eric said, voice cold and steady. "If they want to reclaim their empire, they'll have to face us on our terms." The queen clicked her mandibles in agreement. "The hive will fight beside you, human. The apex must survive." Inside the shattered prison, the rebels fortified their position, repurposing broken machinery into barricades and weapon platforms. Eric's hackers worked furiously, leveraging every ounce of captured technology to disrupt incoming signals and scramble the enemy's communications. "Signal jamming is holding at 70%, one whispered through the comm. "But they're sending in dropships now." Explosions rocked the compound as dropships descended, disgorging squads of Drovak shock troops, the air filled with the screams of battle and the searing hiss of plasma fire. But the rebels held firm. Eric moved through the chaos like a ghost, rallying fighters, organizing ambushes, and targeting supply caches. Every move was precise, calculated to maximize their uneven advantage. The Drovak commanders, once so confident, now faced a brutal reality. Their empire's cornerstone was crumbling. Their arrogance had blinded them to the truth. The human was not a mere prisoner, but a herald of their downfall. Suddenly, a massive explosion tore through the central command tower, sending debris skyward like deadly rain. The rebels roared, with renewed fury. With their leadership compromised, the shock troops faltered. Eric seized the moment. "Push forward! Break their lines!" The battle surged forward, the clash of claw, steel, and strategy echoing through the compound. The insectoid warriors swarmed the enemy, their razor-sharp limbs slicing through armor with terrifying efficiency. Amidst the melee, Eric spotted Thrax emerging from the shadows, bloodied but unyielding. Their eyes locked once more, the unspoken challenge burning between them. Thrax charged, furious. But this time Eric was ready. He sidestepped the brutal assault and drove his improvised blade deep into the commander's chest. Thrax's roar faded to a gurgle, and he collapsed. The rebels cheered, but Eric's eyes were already scanning the horizon. The fleet wasn't defeated yet. From the battered command tower, a transmission crackled through. "Reinforcements en route. Full lockdown initiated. No prisoners will escape." Eric clenched his fists. The Empire was desperate now, willing to burn its own worlds to snuff out the rebellion. "Then we won't just escape," he said grimly. "We'll take the fight to them." Gathering his closest allies, Eric activated a concealed communication beacon, a distress signal meant to reach any listening human or allied forces beyond the Drovak sphere. "This isn't just our fight anymore," he told them. "We're the spark that will ignite the galaxy's fury." As the Drovak military tightened its grip, the prisoners and rebels prepared for a final stand. But Eric's confidence was unshaken. The apex predator does not wait to be hunted. It hunts. And the galaxy was about to learn what that meant. The night sky was ablaze with the fire of warships and streaking plasma bolts. The Drovak reinforcements had arrived in full force, but the prison uprising had ignited a spark that could not be easily extinguished. Commander Eric Voss stood at the forefront of the chaos, his body battered but his spirit unbroken. Around him, the rebels fought with a ferocity born of desperation and hope. The insectoid queen Ithara moved with lethal grace beside him, her warriors cutting down enemies with ruthless precision. "Commander," a voice crackled through his comm. "The signal's been picked up. Reinforcements from the outer colonies are en route. Estimated arrival in 90 minutes. Eric's jaw tightened. "Good. We hold the line until then." The prison's defenses shook under the barrage of enemy fire. Dropships descended, unleashing waves of heavily armed soldiers. But the rebels, now armed and organized, met them with unyielding resistance. Eric darted between cover and combat, coordinating strikes and rescuing trapped prisoners. His mind was a steel trap, analyzing, adapting, exploiting every weakness. In the Drovak lines, suddenly the ground trembled violently. A massive war machine, a towering mech bristling with weaponry, stormed onto the battlefield, crushing debris beneath its heavy feet. The Drovak's ultimate weapon. The rebels faltered, fear flashing in their eyes. But Eric did not. "This is it," he shouted. "The Apex doesn't back down, we fight." With a roar, he led a charge toward the mech, weaving through fire and shattered wreckage. The insectoid warriors followed, their blades flashing in deadly arcs. Eric leapt onto the mech's leg, clawing at joints and exposed wiring. Sparks flew as he jammed a plasma grenade into an open panel and sprinted clear. The explosion rocked the battlefield, the mech staggering but not falling. It retaliated with a volley of missiles, sending rebels scattering. Eric regrouped with Yathara. "We need to bring it down fast." She nodded, clicking orders to her hive. The hive will swarm its weak points. Together, human tactics and insectoid instinct became a coordinated assault. Rebels fired from elevated platforms, distracting the mech's sensors. The Queen's warriors swarmed its legs and joints, biting and clawing with unrelenting fury. Gradually, the mech faltered, sparks turning to flames. With a final thunderous collapse, it crashed to the ground, smoke billowing. The rebels erupted in cheers, but Eric knew the battle was far from over. Across the battlefield, the Drovak flagship appeared, descending to join the fray. Its massive cannons unleashed torrents of plasma fire, forcing the rebels to take cover. Eric's comm crackled. "Outer Colony fleet has entered system, engaging." A spectacular space battle unfolded overhead, explosions and laser fire lighting the void. The tide was turning, but time was running out. Amidst the chaos, Eric received a transmission from the rebellion's intelligence network. "We've located the facility's central AI core. Cutting its power would cripple enemy reinforcements." Eric's eyes sharpened. "Then that's our target." Leading a small squad through underground tunnels, Eric navigated traps and enemy patrols with relentless determination. Each step brought them closer to the AI core, a sprawling network of servers, pulsing with alien technology. Inside, the rebels encountered fierce resistance, but Eric's team pressed forward, hacking consoles and planting charges. As the countdown began, alarms blared throughout the facility. Drovak forces converged on their position, desperate to stop them. The final battle erupted inside the AI chamber. Blades clashed, plasma bolts scorched the air, and the rebels fought with every ounce of strength left. With seconds remaining, Eric detonated the charges. The AI core erupted in a cascade of sparks and smoke. The facility's system shuddered and died. Above, the Drovak reinforcements faltered, their coordination collapsing. The Outer Colony fleet pressed the attack, forcing the enemy into retreat. Eric stood amidst the wreckage, breathing hard. Around him, the rebels raised their weapons in victory. The apex predator had unleashed its fury, and the galaxy would never be the same. The shattered remnants of the Drovak prison facility smoldered beneath a sky streaked with the fires of retreating warships. The rebellion had won the battle, but the war for the galaxy's soul was only beginning. Commander Eric Voss stood atop a broken tower, gazing out over the horizon. The prisoners, now free, were already organizing, their faces alight with hope and determination. Around him, the insectoid Queen Yathara surveyed the scene, her many eyes reflecting both respect and an unspoken promise. "You have changed the course of this conflict, human," she said softly. "The hive owes you its survival." Eric nodded, exhaustion tugging at his muscles but never dimming his spirit. "We are more than survivors. We are Apex. We adapt. We fight. We endure." The Outer Colony fleet had secured the system, their commanders eager to forge alliances with the newly freed prisoners and coordinate resistance against the Drovak Empire. As Eric spoke with the fleet's leader, Admiral Halavine, plans began. forming for the next stage, a united front against the oppressive empire. But even in victory, Eric knew the price had been high. Friends lost, homes destroyed, and a galaxy still cloaked in fear and tyranny. Freedom isn't given, Eric said to Hala, voice steady. It's taken, and held with vigilance. Admiral Veen smiled grimly. Then we fight together. The Apex united. That night, beneath the fractured stars, Eric sent a message out across the networks, broadcasting a rallying cry to all oppressed species. The predators of old may roar, but the Apex endures. Join us. Stand with us. The galaxy belongs to those who refuse to be hunted. Responses flooded in, messages of support, offers of aid, and the first sparks of a coalition unlike any seen before. In the weeks that followed, Eric worked tirelessly to build alliances, train fighters, and forge weapons from the technology scavenged during the uprising. The Drovak Empire, bruised and enraged, launched retaliatory strikes. But the galaxy was awakening. Systems once silenced by fear now whispered of rebellion. The Apex was rising. One evening, as Eric trained new recruits, under the dim light of a distant star, Kiralis appeared. The scientist's icy demeanor had softened, replaced by something like respect. You have proven the impossible, she said quietly. The Apex isn't strength alone. It is will. Eric smiled. And the will of humanity is unbreakable. Looking up at the stars, he felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders, but also the fire of purpose. The Apex was more than a title. It was a destiny. As the galaxy prepared for the storms ahead, Eric Voss stood ready. Human, prisoner, warrior, and now symbol of a new era. The predators had hunted for too long. The Apex would hunt back.